Hey, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to our conversation today. I'm super excited because we are kicking off our community talks with just amazing people through the city of Chicago and even around this world. This is our second talk, and I'm super excited to have our guest today. One, because as we are doing our community talks with Remixing the Narrative, our whole mission is to just be able to get information, resources, tips to our community so that we're able to not only go into this new year with a new perspective of maybe that business you wanted to start, but also having conversations you don't normally have. And I'm excited about today's conversation because we're going to be talking to an amazing artist who will be sharing some tips and tools on how she was able to make her art form into a business. I am friends. One, I'm a lover of art. I wouldn't say I'm an artist by trade, but I have plenty of friends who are in the industry, whether it is dance, music, singing, acting, um, visual arts, right? But many of them, I've even told about this conversation because they struggle with the business side of it, right? And so this conversation is going to be not only how do we fall in love with art, but how do we really use this to be what passion, what fulfills us and takes care of us. So today's conversation is with Simone Yael. Hello.
Hi, Dream. How are you?
I'm wonderful. And I'm excited because I'm going to learn a lot as well. And so I always love to start conversations with backgrounds, right? Because I believe our story of who we are leads to where we are today. And so I would love for you just to share a little bit about yourself and then we'll get into our conversation.
Awesome. I can do that. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. Hi, everyone. I'm Simone Yael. I am originally from the south side of Chicago, born and raised here for the most part. And then growing up, I kind of grew up in the classroom, right? Like when I wasn't in school, my mother is a school teacher, and my father is an artist, and just both two super creative people. And so basically what I was able to do is just always see learning around me. And in any aspect, I would learn new artistic. I would just do different things every week. So that was really cool growing up that way. When I decided to go to college, I went to SIU Carbondale. I decided to pursue theater. So I was a performer from kind of day one and a writer. Um, so that felt good. That felt like a good place. And then I was able to also use my gifts and talents when I was in SIU, a predominantly white institution. I was able to really help unify a lot of the Black creatives there and troubleshoot some things because, at a predominantly white institution, there weren't that many Black theater things happening, especially in Carbondale, right? If anybody's
Right.
in Illinois. And so I wanted to know, how can I use my talents, my passions to help other people? I just knew that was something that was in my heart. And to be most effective, that was how I would have to operate. And then that was the first time I ever met, being in Carbondale, that was the first time I ever met people from St. Louis and became friends with, Black kids from St. Louis. And then Ferguson happened. So I was still down in Carbondale. I didn't know what to do. I just knew that my friends were there. They needed support, and I wasn't sure how it could look. And I wasn't ready to come back to Chicago. And so what felt right was go check out St. Louis. Just go see. It was 2 hours away. And so at first when I got there, I was like, I am not moving here. I'm not moving here. I'm not doing it. No, and I fought it. And it was very clear that I was supposed to go there. And so my friend Devin calls it throwing your stick into the fire. And so I felt like, okay, so Ferguson had happened. There is this energy. We were over the destruction. We were over tearing things down. Like we were over that part, but there's still this energy. Something still needs to happen, and continue to happen because some things need to change. Right. So the dismantling portion has already happened. Now it's like, okay, let's build. So I was working a regular 9-to-5 job. I was miserable. I was crying every day. I would drive to work crying. I would get in my car and lunch and cry, and I would leave and cry because I wasn't being creative. I was just I was on my spare time, but I wasn't full time doing it. So that was a clear indication that something needed to shift and change. So long story short, so I'm not too winded too
Oh,
long.
you're good. You're good.
Basically, once I got to St. Louis, I started working at a nonprofit. I started doing some operations and coordination, still a 9 to 5, right? But it was at the front desk of a charter school in St. Louis. And I got face to face with, no, I didn't know anyone, right? I knew one person there. I got face to face with this different city that was very different from Chicago in some ways, but was very similar.
Yeah.
So I felt home. I felt like these are my cousins. So I started listening and tapping in and getting to know the young creatives, the young people, their parents. Like, I was in such a unique position there that I'm really very thankful for, to see, like, okay, we know we have a problem here. We know we have some issues. What do they need? What do they want? What do they like? What are they asking for? So very clearly right away, music, big thing, St. Louis, very talented musicians, fashion. So I was like, okay. And then I also had a part-time at H&M, a part-time job. So like, let me see how I can put these different things together. So I bought some shirts and I dyed these shirts like how JayZ seasoned, how Kanye West did his stuff. And what I would hear the young people saying, when I say young people, like people younger than me,
Yeah.
what I would hear them saying is, we have all these spaces in St. Louis and nobody's letting us use them. And we're fed up. Like, we try not to tear stuff down, but at the end of the day, we need access. So I said, okay, let's figure it out. And I was doing a photo shoot with some friends. I was just playing around with the camera that I had. And I was like, you know what? We should do a fashion show on the street. We should just pick a spot downtown. We should get our music and go out there, tell everybody, don't tell people what it is, just tell people, meet us at this spot, do that, and we're gonna do a fashion show. And we did. And that was a very interesting, pivotal moment, like, in my life. And I think, like, in that moment in time, because it was not the first time I had gotten a chance to, like, throw my stick into the fire and take these talents and troubleshoot something. But I think it was the first time where I did it with people I didn't know. Like, I had been there maybe 6 months and I was like, okay, so this is something. Like, this is really something. And it's not me. Like, it's about the overall overarching mission. So that's kind of how it starts to progress. And I'm in Chicago now, but there's more in between, but we could talk about that later.
Yeah. But see, the reason I love that, like, it was not wasted at all, is that it shared a lot of, like, the evolution of you, right? And so you started just even with your parents being artists and educators, and how full circle you're ending up in St. Louis in the same space as an artist and educator, right? That stuff like that isn't coincidence. And then I feel like a lot of times when we are in a place of, metamorphosis, right? Like this change of me, sometimes change of space is necessary as well, right? Because I think about, it's true. Like, I visit St. Louis, definitely feel like cousins, right? My southern cousins, right? But I think the cool thing about it is that sometimes we need that space that's slower to really hear what we're supposed to be doing. I feel like Chicago, what I'm Southside born and raised as well. I feel like that grit, that I'm gonna make this thing, we gonna work it out. We need that, and sometimes we need that in bringing that to a different space, right? And so I believe that your journey from Carbondale to there was all what led you to now be able to be who you are today, right? And so people need to hear that story, because sometimes what ends up happening, they're like, what the heck is going on? Like, why am I here? It's people listening. I can relate to being in a space that no longer serves me, right? Like, I'm working something and I know that there's something more. And the frustration of, how do I get out of this space to get to where I'm supposed to be? And just understanding in your story, it all led you there, right? You just had to keep going. Like, you needed that moment to be crying in your car, right? So that it'll kind of fuel you as to what you don't want to do. You get clarity of that. So then you may not know what you want to do, but you're clear with what you don't want to do, right? So I know now we're at, a place where you said you're back in Chicago. So there was a time where you had to leave St. Louis. Uh, I want to go to this next question because I think it's going to be tied in, is what led you to fall in love with art, right? Because you shared, I did theater, and then, we have photography, and we did this fashion show, and the kids were saying they need these creative spaces. So what led you to fall in love with art? And I'm interested to know, like, did you land on one particular art form, or did you just kind of embrace all of it that you just shared?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. At first, it was something that I think other people saw in me, right? So I think it was like it was like a personality thing. I just kind of had the personality for artistry, specifically like theater, performance, like that kind of vibe. So I gravitated towards it, and then it also like was around me. It was around my family. Like my family does music. Like I said, my father could pick something up and learn it in a week, and then he's on to the next thing, right? So that's a gift and a curse, right? It's like I can do something. So I tried to figure out, okay, so I know I have these different abilities. And then again, like I said, my mom being a school teacher teaching second grade, and even when I wasn't in my classroom, I was in her classroom and watching her teach and watching the science of that thing, like how she cared for the students and how disciplined they were. So there's things that come there. There's a heart thing that comes behind it, right? So, and when I say like fall in love, I think I fell in love many times with art. Like it's every phase of my life. I fell in love in a different kind of way. I think more recently, I fell in love even more deeply because I realized that I don't necessarily have to focus on one thing. I can use these different, because if I don't know something, I can ask Dream, hey Dream, do you want to do this? Can we figure it out? And we can figure that thing out together. So I would like to say probably I like to explore any kind of creativity. And I think we all should at least explore. You don't have to be good at it to really, to find something in it, because you might meet your best friend, like taking a potting class, or, doing a dance class. I think that's just, we're at our best when we're creating and around other creative people. That's just, we're getting and giving life when we're being creative. So it was something.
I love that. There's a few things you said I want to pull out, and I didn't say this at the top, so I see more people are tuning in, and this is an interactive conversation. So yes, we're like chopping it up, but if you have a question, if you have a comment, you're in agreement, like, oh, I can relate, you can put that in the comments. As I have the questions on my end, if you pose a question, I can pull it up as well. But you said a few things, which I think is important, in that um, we meet experiences, or we go through things, and we also meet people, and maybe not necessarily for the season we meet them in, right? Like maybe, I took this dance class, and in that class I met this individual, but the true reason for that connection doesn't manifest to maybe 3 years later, right? Until when we're both at a space where we need to capitalize on each other. And I think understanding that in business and in artistry, um, there is a form of partnership and collaboration in that, right? Like I can be very skilled in something, but I'm also my best when I do it in collaboration with others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there may be some things that, yeah, I'm really dope at, but this person knows the aspect I don't know. When we do it together, we gonna really just like blow this thing out the water. So I think just understanding as we're getting there in your artistry, in your business, it's so important that you feel that you are aware that what you need will meet you along the way, right? And it's okay that you may not be the whole toolbox, but you're going to find those individuals and things that'll help you get there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that makes me think of like healing, right? Like healing, is not linear, but also you can't really do it by yourself. Like you need to go outside. You need to
Yeah.
you need to meet people. You need to. So I think that's like the core key thing I learned in St. Louis, is like clearly we all needed that type of healing. Like that's what drew me, but I had to be open in my heart first. Like I couldn't just go. At first I said no. I was like, no, I don't want to go. It's like, well, you just said you didn't want to be in a 9 to 5. So what do you really want? And I think even now, like we have to ask ourselves that, like, what do you really want? Like, and are you really prepared for what you are saying that you want and what comes with it? Because you're going to have to open your heart, and you're going to have to give of yourself. Like you can't say, I want to do this. And then you get there and you're like, nah, you like,
Yeah.
So
yeah. I love it. So we talked about like fall in love with art, and I believe we're getting there as far as like the business of art, right? So you just said, like, I don't want this to be my 9 to 5. I feel like this is what is in my DNA. It's what I gravitate toward. It makes me feel complete. But it's one thing about having like this feeling of like, man, this is what I want to do. But then there's this other part of like, how's this gonna be my livelihood, right? Like I want to do this, but then sometimes I feel like people who, and this just doesn't apply to artists, I think period, we
Mm-hmm.
are scared to go out there because we're like, but I got bills, I got a family, or I got this, or whatever the case may be. I have a car, I got, so I gotta have something that's steady income. So that's how I feel like most people get stuck in some spaces of like, okay, I don't know yet how this thing is going to provide these immediate needs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I would love for you to, continue this conversation, but lead us to how did you get to a point where this is what I don't want? How
Mm-hmm.
do I create a space where this becomes what I can do full time?
Yeah, you bump your head a lot. It's gonna happen, you know. But what the biggest thing I learned from being, going to school, going away to school, is like sometimes you got to start from scratch. Sometimes you have to get rid of stuff. Sometimes you got to go a year without having whatever it looks like. But there's a method to it. Whatever you want in this world, you can have. It's about what are you willing to sacrifice for it. And so that it didn't happen all at once. It wasn't like I know the plan, I know the way, this is what I'm doing. It took for the rest of the time I was living in St. Louis up until I moved to Cincinnati, Ohio in 2018 for me to even figure out the basics of that thing. I had to study, right? I knew some people that lived that life, but I had to like get on the internet and figure it out. I had to listen to Kanye West and see like how did he figure that out? I had to study Rihanna. I had to, people that I might not have the quickest access to, but I had to study how they kind of set up their brands and their lifestyles, even though it's something different. So I think the first thing is you decide what you want, then you study it, and you figure out, how do I have these things, right? What position mentally, spiritually, emotionally do I need to be in to keep this up? Because you can get something and not keep it.
Yeah.
Like, you can quit your job and go sell some t-shirts. We can do that. But do you understand how to live like that? Is that really what you want? Is what comes with the implications of that? And then getting with people. So then once you move into that space, right? You're already that person. Pharrell says this. You're already that person. Put yourself in that place. So once you move into that space, even if you're just pretending at first, then you start meeting other people that are actually doing it. Then you're like, okay, they're actually living this life. Like they actually have the things that it is that I want, that I say I want. They're living that life. So then you can even up close evaluate, okay, is this still what I want? So you just taking it. Some people say like, I take life one day at a time. I have learned you gotta take that thing 2 minutes at a time
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And I love the fact that I think that we're in such a pivotal time in history where um actually I was just talking to someone about this, that this whole, there's limited access, right, to an extent, but then there's endless access to another extent, right? And especially when it comes to like a business idea or an art, like a skill you want to learn. Like me and my mom were actually talking about during this pandemic, there was a gentleman and he lost his job, furloughed, all this stuff, and he taught himself how to make key lime pies during this pandemic, right? To the point now he has like this booming bakery,
yeah.
right? Like he went from like not knowing anything about cooking and baking to studying the art form of it, right? Like I may not have nothing, but I got YouTube. I can watch, cooking shows, I can whatever. And he just got in the kitchen and figured that thing out. And he was able to create, like never went to culinary school, none of that, right? But it's like if this is something I'm saying I want to do, I really have no excuse why I can't do it, right? Like I can look up how to make it, and then I can also look at how bakeries like set up their business, right? Like what are
Mm-hmm.
they selling? What's the price points? All that stuff. But like you said, I think it's a part of like mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Mindset is huge. When we study people who are in their thing, like it's a science to it, right? Like people aren't just like, oh, I'm gonna be like this dope music producer. Like there's a science to it. And you got to learn like what is their methods, what's their habits, what's the thing that they're doing, because you could, like you said, get into a space but not necessarily stay in a space. And That I think was major. That even when we're trying to figure out the next thing, there are opportunities for us to see it already in somebody else, and how do we get to where they are.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's major.
I also want to include too, and this is like, this was not planned, right? Dream and I did not talk about this.
No.
There are so many books. Like my collection of books has grown so much since the pandemic, because I mean, we really have anything else to do. And it was like I would watch YouTube people that there were like be people that I would lock into, and there would be books that they would suggest. Think and Grow Rich is one, for example. You Are a Bad A. I'm not gonna say the whole word. You Are a Bad A. You Are a Bad A with money. Like
I got them all over there.
So I grew up reading as a kid, but the pandemic was like, look, girl, get into yourself. Like, let's figure this out. And it required the art of the pivot. So there were a lot of books that I read that really changed how I thought too, because I got to firsthand see how people that are doing these things that we want to do are doing, and how they came to those conclusions. So,
yeah, and I love you brought that up too, because I feel like it's important when you are studying anything, right? Like you realize that people who are in those spaces are continually in student mode.
Yep.
Right? Like they're like looking, like gyms to them are like being able to sit with someone else who's where they want to be. And like you said, what are the habits I need to shift? Because maybe I'm at this level, but I'm trying to get to that level. And like you said, you listen to them and they're like, well, you know what? Every one thing that and like you said, we didn't plan this. One thing that I am shifting in my life and is major for me is my health.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've realized is that many of the people that I study and want, and when like you talked about your circle, like the people around, like when you start changing your mindset, there's just certain things you can't take with you.
Yep.
Right? There's certain habits, there's certain conversations, there's certain interests that you can't, not necessarily you can't take with you. They're just not going to be the forefront they used to be, right? And something that I value, but I'm seeing more the value is like my health. People that I really, really, really look up to and who are been very pivotal in like this shift in my life are prioritize health.
Yes.
Like they get up early and they work out. They prioritize what they eat. The sleep matters. Like this whole like don't sleep when you die. You know what I mean? Like they're like, actually, I go to bed at 9:00.
I need my 8 hours.
You know what I'm saying? I go to bed at 9:00. Guess what? I wake up at 5 to work out, and then I elongate my day. Right? Like they do those kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh shoot, I've been doing it wrong. Like I got to be right. But I just think you learn those little things that seem minor, but they make major shifts. So. Yeah. If you're watching this, a part of the business, I think a lot of times we're like, man, I just want the money. I just want the instant, I own my time. I can do whatever. But there's also a science and discipline you have to put yourself in order to stay in that place. Because you can live it in a little bit, as we've seen folks, and then 2-3 years later, they couldn't sustain it, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think I love that you say that, like there's a discipline in the practice of the thing. And I think for me, I'm working on finances because for a long time I was afraid. Like there was this fear, and we don't have to even get into the depths of it, but I'll just generally say, we could save that for another conversation, but I'll generally say I was afraid I kind of avoided it because I was afraid to get to the level financially that I would say that I wanted to, and I wasn't making specific goals, and I wasn't being disciplined because a lot of that was programming. So yeah, discipline, like analyzing your programming, like how am I programmed in whatever facet, and deprogramming that thing, and then reinstalling new programming. So that's what that looks like.
Yeah, I definitely feel a part two. I know my brother Jermaine watching. You hear that? We got a part two with Simone coming up. All right, so we're at the place where the evolution of your business, and I know we kind of spoke to that. I don't know if this is a space where you want to share. You just let me know when you want to share. But I think it's important as we're talking about these nuggets. You're demystifying a myth that I've always heard about artists, in that artists are undisciplined. Right, like this whole idea of free spirit. I think there's it's needed, right? Because like I said, most of my closest friends, if not even my brother, there are artists, but I think that there's a level of freedom you need to have.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a level of discipline within that freedom, right? And so I think even people hearing this conversation is like, artist, business, I don't even go together. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Many of our top people who are running this world are artists. You know what I mean? They're artists within like their sector.
Yep.
They have to be creative and visionary, right? If
Mm-hmm.
not, they're gonna stay stagnant. You have to be able to have big vision in order to really stay where you are. So yeah, so at this point I wanted us to kind of key in on like the evolution of your business and whatever you feel to share at this space, we can.
Sure. So there's two things I want to say. The first thing is there's like an interview that JayZ has with somebody, and they kind of pose that same like myth, right? Of like, yeah, you have all this. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, right? This is the Simone version. You have all this money, JayZ, and like you're an artist. Like you started off as a rapper. Da, da, da. He's like, there's like this like lie that you can't. You have to be an artist and not have money. Like who? Somebody lied, and like, but that makes me think that there's somebody that wants to be that middle person, right? That's like, you can have all this freedom that you want as an artist, and I'll just do the money stuff for you. So I could have gone that route, right? Like when I was like deciding post graduation, I knew I didn't want to do Broadway in New York. That seemed like too much pressure and like super superficial. I didn't want to do Hollywood. That also felt like superficial. No offense to anybody that lives that kind of life, but I just knew that wasn't for me, right? But I knew that one of the core veins, and this is just for me personally, right? One of the core veins, as I was like praying and seeking and asking and knocking and being like, okay, I want this thing full time. I want to create full time. That's all I said. I wasn't specific. I didn't throw any numbers. I just said, I want to do this full time when I was in St. Louis. So I visited Cincinnati and I was like, okay, Midwest, I never thought I would ever want to live here, but I did. I felt like there were things that I could help with and assist with there. Like they had a lot of, at that time in 2018, Cincinnati, Ohio was the fastest growing city in the Midwest economically. And I knew that if I had to sustain this, I needed something practical, like the money, right? Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, I know about nonprofits. I know about education. That's part of my core, right? That could be the baseline. That could be the sustainability portion, right? And I very clearly had heard nonprofit performing arts programs. I'm like, okay, so how do those work? So I get I'm working in the schools. I'm click, clack, clacking on my keyboard. I'm talking to people. I'm having coffee. I'm meeting these people, artists and educators, right? And I'm figuring out, okay, how is this sustained? I learned about grants. I learned about those sorts of things. And I realized, okay, so what is the artist version of a grant? I learned about residencies. So I'm like, okay, let me figure that part out. And I knew that was a very unique niche, specifically for Black women that really hadn't been tapped into. So I take a lot of course, being from Chicago, I take a lot of inspiration from Kanye West. And I also am very inspired by Donald Glover or Childish Gambino, because he does all these different kind of pockets. So I said, okay, if they can do it, Solange as well. So she's doing music, but she's also like working with universities. So I'm like, okay, people are doing this thing and I'm studying them. I'm taking things that I like. I'm advocating for myself. I'm doing different residencies now. Now I live in Cincinnati at this point. Did a residency with them, did some shows with them. So it kind of went from the street, right? Now it's in the institution. So now I'm learning that, okay, it can be there, but I want it under my own terms. So I'm very much still in the thick of this dream. I'm being honest. Like,
and guess what? It's okay. We all are. We're all figuring it out.
I'm still figuring out which way I want it to go. But I know that for sure, I know that I will always want to do more than one thing. And I know that I will always want to figure out how to get resources to people like me. So right now, I would say that I categorize my work as artistry, but I'm also a maker and a social architect. So what that looks like for me is, if I don't have the ability or the access, I know where to find it, or I know someone who does. So really for me, as I'm troubleshooting things, right? Practical needs. Now that I'm living in Chicago, I've moved back. I've been here for about 6 months or so. Figuring out the different components. Okay, I know Jarena likes this, Jermaine likes this, Ashley likes this. They're good at this part. Okay, we need this. Really trying to see how the pieces move and shake in different ways. So that's where I'm at right now. I wonder if, tell me what you think about this, but I wonder if we have time for me to kind of share, and it doesn't have to be right now, it can be a little later. Kind of like this practical, it's like, it could be like a mini little workshop. And we might be able to do that at the end. So let me know.
We got time. I ain't got nothing to do for a minute. And I mean, even the next part is just like advice for aspiring artists. So this could be that piece, right?
Yeah.
So the one thing I just wanted to add to what you said is, and I have a good friend. So this is the first year, like I'm stepped out fully doing my business full time, and yay, right? I have a friend that, like you said, we stay connected because he did it a year and a half before me. And so I'm like, this is where I'm at. And he's like, it's cool. It's, it's good, And one thing he helped me is understanding that in anything we do, we are as strong as our network. And that's what you just said, right? So he was like, at the end of the day, I ain't got to be a master of all things, because the advantage I have over the next person is just I have access, right? Like he's like, it's something I may not know, like you just said, like it's something about literacy or community work or working in schools. I'm like, you know what, Jarena, maybe it's something when it comes to writing this business proposal, whatever. I know the person to call. Maybe it's something tech side. I know who to call. A lot of times it's just about how close and easy is you to get to access to folks. So it's not so much about I have to know all these things. And I think that's the myth. Like, oh my gosh. And not necessarily being a middle person, but understanding that leverage for you is just who are you connected to, right? And so when you went to that idea of like with JayZ, some people who do, they make money off being the middle person, right? Like, oh, you don't know this part, so I'll manage it while you just do that.
Yeah.
That's different than I'm still doing me, but when I get to this maybe hump in the road, I know who I can call to help me get over the hump, and I'm gonna keep going forward. So I think that's major, that we understand that we're not gonna be masters of all, but that's why it's so important who is in that circle as you're moving forward, because that's the same thing with, you mentioned JayZ, he's like my favorite of everything, right? Similar, right? Like I would be naive to think that when he was going to this sector of like beverage and stuff like that he wasn't calling like a Diddy, right? Like, hey, how did you start that? When he got to this part of like the sports agency, that he didn't have like people he just called up that he knew, that he still owned that thing, he's still moving forward, but because of his network, he was able to expedite some steps. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's what's really important in our businesses.
Yeah, and I think depending on how deep you want to get into it, that shows you what you need to do. I think, I think we can think our way into and out of anything. And as long as you can figure out how the parts work, you can leave the talents to the talented, right? So if someone is really good at something and you don't need to know that information, go pay them to do it, or practically offer them hours for hours. Hey, this might take you 3 hours. What can I do for you to serve you, to, give back to you? It doesn't have to necessarily be financial. It's between whatever y'all decide. So I think that's practically, that part is important too. Like asking people for help. You have to, like, there's no way that you can do it alone. But if you want to learn those things, like Kanye went in, I think he went in interned at somewhere, but he got paid dirt. But he went and interned like as a grown man, like as an artist, as a producer. I forgot what company, I can't think of it right now. But he went in, interned somewhere and said, I want to learn this thing from the inside out. And 5 years later, that made him his first $1 billion. So yeah.
Well, cool. So we're here where any advice you want to give. So at this point, I know you want to share some things with those who are listening in.
Yes, I do. In the meantime, I could pause and see if anyone had any questions or anything, any comments.
Yeah. So We've definitely seen people coming in saying hi and things. No one has posed a question though, so I'll
Cool.
definitely let you know once that happens.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm gonna share my screen really quickly. Okay. Are we good? Can you see
We're
me?
good.
Okay. So this is one of the first things that I think I came across. I wonder how I can make this bigger. This is one of the first things I came across when I was like trying to figure out, what do I want to do, right? How do I want this to look? I don't even remember how this happened, but it just like it just divinely came to me. And it's called Ikigai. And as you all can see, it's a Japanese concept meaning a reason for being. And basically, Ikigai is a sweet spot, right? Where you can practically analyze different things in your life. What should you really be doing, right? And then there are these little areas where you can kind of figure out some of the things, right? You can say, I'm really passionate about something. So that's something that you love and something you're good at, but it's not necessarily something that the world needs or you can get paid for. So the idea is to be able to reach here. What is something you love, something you're good at, something you can be paid for, and something the world needs? That's going to tell you what you should be spending your time on. If we can get here and whatever we decide to do, you won't need for anything because you'll be happy, you're passionate, right? You're in love with it, you're good at it, so you feel useful. It's something the world needs, again, something you feel useful for, and it can be sustained and something you can be paid for. So I love showing people this.
Yeah, keep that up. I like that because I'm looking at like for instance, our professions are things we're good at and we can get paid for, right? Our mission is what we love and what we need, right? Like what we feel like is a need. Our passion is what we're good at and what we love. Our vocation, right, is something you can just get paid for and it's something you need. But like everything encompasses in the center. And I think that that is super, super important. Like even if there's a way we can access to send this out like to folks, that'll be dope because I think that a lot of times you like you said, you'll be like, man, I really love this thing and I need it, it's my mission, but I don't necessarily know how to get it to the center. So I like the visual for this.
Yeah, me too. And I'm glad that I appreciate you. I love the synergy that we were able to just like kind of bounce off of this. I think that's great. And I love this version of it. I'll see how I can get it out to people, but I love this version because it also tells you like what it's almost like a symptomatic. Like it kind of shows you like, okay, I'm excited, but I don't know how I can sustain this, right? Or I'm excited and I feel full, but I don't have any money, and it kind of gives you this troubleshooting guide. And I would also encourage people to go ahead and put whatever it is that you're thinking that you should be doing in the middle. And maybe if we do decide to do another, like a part 2 of this, this could be like a practical workshop. What I wanted to do was do kind of like a 90-day manifesto. So it could be something practical. Yeah. Working through this for each person individually. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could leave this up. This is on the Learn Life website. I don't really know how they go about workshopping this kind of thing, but it's there if you want to look at it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Maybe this is a cool time. Also, I know it's up if you want to show your art so people can. I know you have.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see where we at. Let's start a little bit from the bottom. So this is one of the things we did in St. Louis was like when I was talking about the guerrilla fashion shows, which are the pop-up fashion shows. And when I came up with the concept of a guerrilla show, that's a theater, like a kind of a theater thing. But basically, we picked these places that we felt like would just be not random, but you wouldn't expect to see a fashion show, right? So the subway was one of them. It was our most well-attended one. And that kind of evolved from, we did a shoot with Marie Claire, which was really cool. That's an image from that. Did some merch. Like I said, I love Kanye West. I'm from Chicago. So we did a bunch of different merch. things. And then we actually ended up doing a show um, in an office space in St. Louis that was like the finale almost. I always saw two Black women playing the violin as part of the show. So that was something. And we just really turned it into this, like almost like a live, not an art museum, but in a way. So it's kind of difficult to describe, but we had a great time. We had a lot of fun. So I designed a lot of those concepts and pieces, designed a lot of the different fashion elements, did some other work in St. Louis, did their best dress of, I think it was 2018. I was elevated for that. And then when I moved to Cincinnati, this is kind of like what the fashion shows in the galleries would look like. There were pieces and concepts that I would design, that some of my friends would design, but I was basically curating the show of itself. So here's some pieces from that. You all might have seen this chain behind me. That is one of the first pieces that I ever created, and I sold that in the Contemporary Art Center. So yeah, and that was really exciting. This is a throwback of the first show in St. Louis. It was gritty, y'all, like gritty, like dirty. But I felt like it needed to be in order to really show people like it can be that. It doesn't have to be clean. Fashion art, it doesn't have to be clean. It doesn't have to be in a gallery space, but it is pretty cool when it is. So here's a little bit of a recap from some of the stuff at the art gallery. I think that was the first time they had ever done that. And then when I moved to Cincinnati, it kind of evolved into, okay, we're talking about money, right? So we did, in October, we did a pop-up, which every admission was like $10. And then you could come and swap. Like you could come and bring your clean clothes and we would swap them. So that was like a pop-up thing that we did, which was really great. And then between then, I would just do some shoots with my friends. Like we would go and I would, in some cases, also curate the clothes, but I just love taking photos and making people feel loved and seen. So that's a lot of that work. And then that stuff got me my first curatorial residency for art gallery, which was at this gallery called Wave Pool. And the concept of that is, actually, I want to show y'all that. The concept of that is the Midwest Megazord. And I feel like every city in the Midwest has its own kind of thing. And once we all like decompact and then come back together, it's like this Megazord from Power Rangers. So. That's kind of how my brain was working. And then here's some of the artists from that. Sky Jetta's from Detroit. Dutana is from Minneapolis, but she's now Cincinnati based. Trina Rager is from St. Louis and now lives in Chicago. And Day Williams is a skateboard artist. And so curating was something very different for me, but it felt really good to be able to bring together these different women identifying artists and showcase their work. So that was a lot of fun. And this is a little bit from that.
So my mind is like going a million an hour. Like, well, you'll learn about me, Simone, is that this kind of stuff excites me because the idea of like seeing like beauty in spaces where people don't normally see it, right? And I think just like the way when we talk about community, like repurposing it and making it like this is a big push about like enhancing neighborhoods through the arts, right? And just being able to bring community together through the arts. And so just even this idea of like a fashion show outside, you know what I mean, in areas that people will probably deem as you shouldn't be there. I think there's a lot of ideas, but I think that it's important, as you just showed us in your artistry, just how you also are able to not only highlight the beauty in those spaces, but like give a new experience to art, you know? And so I think it's important that we're always thinking outside of what we normally see of like, how can we really elevate spaces through just how do we elevate spaces without all of the, I think sometimes like the superficial beauty, right? Like, oh well, let's just, do this, like tear this down and like, no, let's actually like do something with the way it's already set up. So yeah, that's really cool.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I think I the biggest thing I'll say is this. The biggest takeaway is just use what you have, right? There's this meme going around with Mariah Carey being at somebody's DJ booth talking about, I'm going to use what I got. Like, I'm use what I got. But that's real. Like, use what you got. And I think as long as we can, I'm going to stop here real quick.
Okay.
As long as we can do that, it definitely takes some introspection, right? It's going to take you to sit down for a second and like really analyze and think, and to ask people. Like, I had to sit with myself, but I had to ask people, like, what is something you've always seen me do? Or like, what do like, what do you need? What does the community need? And I think that if we can get to that part, we'll be fine.
I love it. And this is right where we're at, like advice for aspiring artists. So a few things I've heard you say, you just said this, like really like take inventory and talking to our circle of like what they've seen us do and what we may not even see ourselves. But a lot of times some of our skill sets we just do naturally, right? And it's like what we're known for. We may not even see it and realize it. We talked earlier about the discipline of your art. So really studying it, reading books, watching videos, doing what you need to do so you can become more grounded and your mindset can continue to develop. And then just really, we talked about just making sure like also the people you're around, like them cultivating that as well. My last piece before we share how people can stay connected is, what are some things that you think artists should consider as we're going into this new year? Whether in the business side of things, art side of things, like what would you say is something that should be considerations right now?
Yeah. Two things. One is just like advice, and I think the other is like a practical thing. I'll do the advice first. Not advice, but kind of what I've been doing. So whatever we think we will experience is exactly what we will experience. Whatever you think will happen is what will happen. And as a collective, we have a lot of power. So if we put our minds and our thoughts on things that are good and helpful, and not just for us, right, for the good of everyone, that can really change this world, right? So I really encourage us to be mindful of the things that we say. Take inventory. Also, I love that term, take inventory. Take inventory about your thoughts. Think about what you're thinking about. Watch what you're watching. Listen to really what you're listening to, and just pay attention. And I think we have more collective power and energy than I think that we believe that we do. So that was the first part. And then the second part, practically, that I think it kind of ties into what we just talked about, but also like something for us to be encouraged about. Make sure that you have mentors and mentees. So I think the best way to learn and keep learning is you have to be able to kind of teach that thing. And you don't have to be perfect in it, but there should be someone younger than you or a few people younger than you that you're investing in, that you're spending time with, that y'all can learn from each other. And be helpful to one another. And then also someone older than you. And if that looks like you have to buy somebody coffee or go to lunch, get them a gift, do it. Like, ask for help and be helpful to other people. So that's what I'm thinking.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So as we close, how can people stay connected? At the bottom, I have Simone's IG, so you can follow her there. Is there anything else that you would want people to know as ways to stay connected to you or hear about like what you have going on?
Yeah, I think Instagram is great. I love Instagram. I'm like on it all the time. Sometimes I take breaks, but for the most part, I love it. Even if I'm not posting, I'm like watching. What are people doing? Also, I learned that messenger pigeons are a thing, and if you want to just shoot me one, that's cool, as long as I can keep it. I think we'll be fine. Want to send me something via messenger pigeon? Work it out. That's it. That's all.
Awesome. Well, this has been our conversation with Simone Yael. I've truly appreciated learning more about you, your artwork, your business. I believe you definitely left us with some gems that we can walk away with and really think about as we end this year. This will not be the end you see of Simone, as you all have heard. I definitely see some follow up and even some execution of some of the artistry that you talked about, maybe with our brand, where we mix the narrative, just like ways we can connect and collaborate as well. If you're watching this later, definitely in the comments, if you have questions or any things that you want to ask, we will make sure that Simone gets that information. And at this time, we're going to close out. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Simone, for
Thank you.
getting up this Saturday morning to talk. And we'll definitely be in touch soon.
Thank you so much, Dreama. Thanks everybody for watching.
Bye.